let's chat about the method and ingredients I've decided to share with you because I felt they work the best to create the tastiest gluten-free vegan bread machine loaf. To keep things less complicated and more simple, I'm going to go over what I felt was my favorite one, which is the one that you're gonna find the recipe in the description, but then you can go to the full recipe post to see all the ingredients and the clear instructions on how to make this gluten-free vegan bread machine loaf. One in the middle is the loaf that included plant milk and water, so not just water, but both milk and water, and it included a little bit more yeast than this one, let's say. So this one and this one have 2 teaspoons of active yeast, and they also include more liquids. The total amount was like 2 1/4 cups, as opposed to this one only had 1.5 cups. If you do not have a nut allergy, you can replace the seed flour in my recipe ingredients with almond flour or another nut flour if you wish, and it's going to work as well. As for the methods for the bread machine, because we might all have different machines, I would recommend just using the baking setting to begin, not the gluten-free setting and not the other ones that can also mix and knead and punch and do all those little features. So I want you to consider mixing the ingredients in a separate bowl first to make sure everything is well mixed. And then you're going to take the dough and either let it rise in the bowl like this, or let it rise in the bread pan that comes with your bread machine. And then you're going to bake it only. So what that means is that you're not going to use the paddle attachment. You're just going to put your dough in the pot and bake it. That's it. That creates the best loaf in my opinion. And every machine I'm sure has different settings or can perform differently. But to me, I felt like that was the best way. I've tried mixing it directly in the bowl and letting it rise and then baking it, but I feel like, number one, I don't want to scratch my bowl, and then by mixing it in a different one, that's a little bit easier, making sure that everything is very well incorporating it. And then I've also tested the bread machine on a setting. This one was like the whole wheat setting, and then I let the machine do its thing. I had no idea what it was going to do, but it basically was set for about 4.5 hours, and in between the bowl being warm or mixing or letting it rise or punching or kneading, I let the machine do its thing, and in the last hour it baked the loaf, although I feel like it could have baked another 10 minutes. So if I had to try this again, I would bake it on the baking setting for an additional 10 minutes after that. I'm not sure if there's a way to tweak that. I'd have to play with my machine a little bit more, but to me, just to keep things simple, I just let the dough rise and just use the machine to bake the bread, and that's it. And in that way, you are left with just a pinhole as opposed as a larger paddle hole. Because when you use a bread machine, if you use the setting to mix, this little paddle is actually going to be inserted in your bread loaf. And forgive my ignorance, but I had never owned a bread machine. So when I got it, I'm like, what? You mean that every loaf is going to bake with a paddle underneath it? That's crazy. But I think some machines are maybe better than others as far as leaving a smaller hole. But to me, if I can avoid that big of a hole, I'd rather just bake the loaf in the machine and that's it. So as far as the ingredients, if you have questions about flour substitution, just ask me below or go directly to the recipe post on Fresh is Real and ask me the questions there. But the ingredients I'm going to share with you again, they're going to be listed underneath in the description of this video, are the ones that I feel yield the best loaf as far as flavor and texture and all that. This bread is actually good cold. It's not the type of bread that you need to toast. It's actually good fresh. It's really, really good. And I bet you I could fool my kids or my husband about this with this bread. Sourdough bread is a little bit different because the flavor is a bit different compared to a regular loaf, but this is really good bread. And it does not have eggs, and it does not have gluten, and it does not have dairy. So it's top 8 free. So if you know somebody that has food sensitivities or allergies, this is a really good bread recipe to recommend. I was also going to go over baking this bread in the oven, but I know it's possible. So because this is a video for the bread machine, let's just leave it at that. And then in the future, I might share this recipe with the baking instructions for the oven at a later time. But for now, if you want to experiment, go for it. The only other thing I would like to add is that in my gluten-free vegan Facebook group, I asked the question. I said, I'm filming tomorrow. Is there any questions you have in regards to a bread machine? And 2 of them were, why do I bake my loaf and it's nice and like it rises when it bakes, but then when I take it out or it cools, it goes flat. And that could be a few different things. It could be that either it didn't rise enough, maybe it rose too much, maybe you had too much water. I wouldn't think that a bread machine would be not hot enough because you wouldn't really want all the breads to flop. So I'm sure the heat itself is adjusted well, but maybe you do have an option on your machine to increase the heat. Hotter is not a bad thing. In the oven, I bake my loaves at 450, and if I could do it hotter, I would, but I'm kind of like melting my oven at this point. And then another question was, can you do sourdough bread in a bread machine? And the answer is for sure. You can definitely bake a sourdough loaf in the bread machine, but it doesn't get as crispy or golden as it might using like a Dutch oven in an oven. So yes, it can be done. Is it as good? It's different. It's not bad. It's just different. And if you were to do the whole process of mixing your ingredients and letting the machine rise and punch and knead your dough, I would say, like, I tried the whole wheat setting on mine, and I think the steps that it took to mix and knead and bake this loaf would be probably good for a sourdough loaf. But I mean, I would have to try it. I have not tried it. I think that is it. And please, if you have any questions, just let me know below, because I can't think of anything else that I could answer right now. Thank you for watching this bonus video, and I will see you in the next one.